So this morning, I've come to the conclusion that I have a lot more work to do concerning the false narratives perpetrated by liars and deceivers, twisting the words of Yohanan in Revelation 12, and I'm going to make yet another attempt to expose these lies and bury them in the dirt where they belong. What lies am I talking about? Well, the lie that somehow that the woman with the crown of 12 stars is the church. Let me first go to screen share, and I'm going to bring up the European flag first. Get rid of this. EU flag. Right. What do you see when you see the EU flag? Well, I don't know why it doesn't. There we go. What do you see? A crown of 12 stars. Right here, the flag of Europe is the flag and the emblem of the European Union and the Council of Europe. It consists of a circle of 12 golden stars on a blue background. Okay. Now let me get that out of the way. And what I want to do is expose first where a false, where the false narrative came from. Now, I could go to all kinds of different sources, but I'll go ahead and use this one today on JimmyAkin.com. He's asking the question, Revelation 12, who is the woman clothed with the sun? So let's look at the so-called Pope Benedict's view. This is what Pope Benedict suggests. In his book, Jesus of Nazareth, Volume 2, he writes, when the book of Revelation speaks of the great sign of a woman appearing in heaven, she is understood to represent all Israel, indeed, the whole church. Wait a minute. That's double talk. Israel is not the church as we know of in Revelation 3, and neither is the church in Revelation 3 Israel. So it's an either or. All right. So this is him speaking in his book. On the basis of corporate personality model in keeping with biblical thought, the early church had no difficulty recognizing in the woman, on the other hand, Miriam, I should read Miriam, not Mary, herself, and on the other hand, transcending time, the church bride and mother, in which the mystery of Mary spreads into history. Really? On another occasion, Pope Benedict said this woman represents Mary, mother of the Redeemer, but at the same time, she also represents the whole church, the people of, as he says, God of all times, the church which in all ages, with great suffering, bring forth Christ ever anew. As Pope Benedict shows us, we don't have to make a forced choice between the possible meaning of what the woman represents. In keeping with the richness of the way of Revelation uses symbolism to use Pope Benedict's phrases, she can be Mary and all Israel and the whole church in different ways. Really? Well, coming from the source, let me show you something first. We need to identify one of the characters in Revelation 12 besides the woman, and that is the great red dragon, Rome, or the man who sits on the throne at Rome. So are we just going to take the dragon's version? Is that acceptable to you? It's not acceptable to me. I'm not going to accept the dragon's version of Revelation 12. That would be like accepting the dragon's version or the serpent's version of, you shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When he said, well, you shall not surely die, because in the day that you eat of it, you will be like gods, knowing the difference between good and evil. Wow. If only people would understand. This is the dragon coat of arms of Gregory the 13th, the great red dragon. He is the persecutor of the woman. He is not the woman with the crown of 12 stars, and neither are his followers the woman with the crown of 12 stars. So that completely eliminates the European church as the woman. So we just saw the crown of 12 stars on the European flag, or that makes the European Union a bunch of fakes, frauds, and counterfeits, including all the 10 kingdoms represented by Europe, including the kingdom of jolly old England itself. I will get to that in a few minutes. So, in order to find out the truth about Revelation 12, we'll go to it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the words of Paul. All right, there appeared a great wonder in heaven, verse 1, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, that would be Rome, and the man who sits on the Roman throne, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And I have gone over, and I have got that little tablet back there. I've already gone over who the 7 heads and 10 horns are. Many, many times. 7 heads began with Augustus, Caesar Augustus. The 10 horns are the 10 kingdoms of Europe, if I can remember them all. Alemanni, Heruli, Langobards or Lombards, Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Suevi, and the Anglo-Saxon kingdom. Now, and his tail drew the third of the stars of heaven, and he did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which is ready to be delivered. Now, first of all, Herod was an Edomite king over the Jews. He was a murderer. He took his orders from Rome, thereby making him in person the dragon which stands before the woman, which was ready to be delivered. And sometime after the child was born, he made an order to kill all the male children up to 2 years old. She brought forth a man-child. So who was it? Was it Miriam or was it Israel? We're going to find out here in just a minute. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was called up unto Jehovah, unto his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of Jehovah that they should feed her 1,203 score days. Did Miriam flee into the wilderness after the child was caught up into heaven for 1,203 score days? No. Who was that woman then? Is it the church? Well, many have followed the doctrine of the great red dragon, including, well, one in particular that comes to mind is Herbert W. Armstrong. And he nearly succeeded. And were it not for Jim Jones and the Guyana Massacre, he might have pulled the same stunt off too. The whole idea was to get the church into Jordan or someplace like that. They called it the place of safety, take all of their money and leave them there to hang out to dry. But the Jim Jones controversy back in the 70s exposed these money-grubbing charlatans for what they are. Liars and thieves. And also, quite frankly, murderers. The 12 stars have always and shall always represent each of the tribes of Israel. Now, proof. If you want to know more proof that these fake churches twist the words of Yohanan and try to claim the crown of 12 stars for themselves, look no further than this. The church and the 144,000. Right here. Who are the 144,000 in the book of Revelation? And I heard the number of the seal, 144,000 sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. Now there it is in black and white, folks. You've got to take it as it's written. But no, they won't. They reject the truth, and they will replace the truth with a lie. Many sincere Bible-believing Christians would understand the 144,000 like this. The church is raptured prior to the Great Tribulation. During the time which the church is gone, a remnant of 144,000 ethnic Jews is converted out of each tribe. These Jewish converts in turn evangelize the Gentiles to make up the great multitude in what? So that's one understanding of Revelation 7. A lot of godly people hold that understanding, but let me explain why I understand the 144,000 differently. So he claims that the 144,000 are not an ethnic Jewish remnant, and certainly not an anointed class of saints who become JWs before 1935. The 144,000 represents the entire community of the redeemed. Let me give you reasons for making this claim. First, in chapter 13, we read that Satan seals all of his followers. So it makes sense that, as he puts it, God would seal all of his people, not just the Jewish ones. Second, the image of sealing comes from Ezekiel 9, where the seal on the foreskin, on the forehead marks out the two groups of people, idolaters and non-idolaters. It would seem that the sealing of the 144,000 makes a similar distinction based upon who worships, as he says it, God, and not among the Jewish remnants worships God. Third, the 144,000 are called the servants of our God, as he puts it, Revelation 7, verse 3. There is no reason to make the 144,000 any more restricted than that, unless, of course, it is written that they are 12,000 of each of the tribes of Israel, but we wouldn't want to accept the truth now, would we? If you are a servant of the living God, as he says, you are one of the 144,000 mentioned here. That's not true. Because there were millions that came before. And there's going to be a lot more servants of Jehovah than merely 144,000. So now he's disputing the number as well. And he's saying you are one of the 144,000 mentioned here in Revelation. The phrase servants of God, as he puts it, always refers to all of God's redeemed people, not just ethnic Jewish remnant. Fourth, the 144,000 mentioned later in chapter 12 are those who have been redeemed from the earth and those who were purchased from among men. This is generic for everybody kind of language. 144,000, a symbolic number of the redeemed, drawn up symbolic number. So it's not a real number, he's saying. Really? From all peoples, not simply the Jews. Wow, this is so. I'll keep on reading because we're going to get to a point here. Besides, if the number is not symbolic, then what do we do with Revelation 14:4, which describes 144,000 that have not defiled themselves with women? Are we to think that the 144,000 refers to a chosen group of celibate men? So he's saying, don't believe what John said, or don't believe what Yohanan said. Are we expected to believe what Yohanan said? This man is saying, no. But what did Yohanan say? Anyone who takes away or adds? It makes more sense to realize that the 144,000 is a symbolic number, not a real number. It's not really 144,000. Just like Satan said to Eve, you're not really going to die, Eve. You're going to become wise as gods. It is a symbolic number. It is described as celibate men to highlight the group's moral purity and set apart for spiritual battle. I love how they like to figurative everything away and call it spiritual. Fifth, the last reason for thinking that the 144,000 is the entire community of the redeemed is because of the highly stylized list of tribes in verse 5 through 8. The number itself is stylized. It's not to be taken literally. Oh, it's not real. You can't take the words of Yohanan literally, he says. And so says all the other preachers out there. You can't expect that to be true, is what he's saying. And here we go, down here. They go and absolve the translators of responsibility when they excluded Dan and they name what is it? Ephraim and Manasseh, I believe it was, and then Joseph or something like that. I can go to it in just a few minutes. He says, and then look at the list of the tribes. There are over a dozen different arrangements of the 12 tribes in the Bible. This one is unique among all of those. Judah is listed first because, as he puts it, Jesus, which I have gone over this so many times, folks, concerning the name. His name is not Jesus or Jesus, it's Yehoshua. Was from there a lion of the tribe of Judah. All 12 of Jacob's sons are listed, including Levi, who usually wasn't because he didn't inherit any land except for one. Manasseh, Joseph's son, Jacob's grandson, is listed in place of Dan. No, it's not. No, it's not. If you would bother to read this particular chapter correctly, you would see that it's a horrible, horrible mistranslation. And I will go. And so they go and say, and they absolve the translators of responsibility by saying, so why not Dan? Dan was left out in order to point the purity of the redeemed church. So you see, folks, he is saying that the 144,000, just like all of the other false churches say, that the 144,000 is the church. It is not. And when I mean the church, I mean the Gentile church. I have gone over this so many times. So let me go ahead and clear this up yet again. See, what did I will first of all read out of Jude 1 and verse 6, and I will go ask everybody to remember it, to memorize it. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day, the judgment of the great tribulation. What do you mean they kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation? We find out what that is when we examine what these fallen angels, what their followers did. They did the same thing. They did the same thing. Well, how did they do that? Their estate, the Gentile church's estate, was the 7 golden candlesticks of Revelation 1, 2, and 3. It never was the 12 stars. Never. We'll go to it. Revelation 1. Oh, am I going to have to go to, I'm really sick and tired of seeing the name Jesus here when it should be Yehoshua. The revelation of Yehoshua, Messiah, whom Jehovah had given unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass, and he sent and signified it by his angel, and to his servant Johanan, who bore record of the word of Jehovah and the testimony of Yehoshua Mashiach. And all these things he saw. Blessed is he that reads and listen to the words of this prophecy, not twist it and distort it. To twist it and distort it brings a curse. And John, or Johanan, pointed out what that curse was. And keep those things which are written therein, for the time of the end is at hand. Johanan to the 7 churches which are in Asia. That means the Gentile churches, not the churches in Jerusalem, not the Israelite churches, but the ones that are in Asia, which were Gentile churches. Grace be unto you from him that is, and which was, and which is to come, and from the 7 spirits which are before his throne, and from, wait a minute, from him that is, and was, and which is to come, that is the Father. And from Yehoshua Messiah, who is the faithful witness, the first born, or the first fruit of the dead, and the prince of the kings of the earth. Unto him that has loved us, washed us from our sins in his own blood, and has made us kings and priests unto Jehovah and to his Father. To him be glory and honor and dominion forever and ever. Behold, he comes with the cloud, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him, and all the kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, saith Jehovah, which is, and which was, and which is to come, Jehovah the Father, the Almighty. He says he is the Alpha, he is Omega, he is the beginning and the end, says Jehovah, which is, and which was, and which is to come, the Almighty. I, Yohanan, who am also your brother and companion in tribulation and in the kingdom and the patience of Yahushua Messiah, was in the isle that which is called Patmos for the word of Jehovah and for the testimony of Yahushua Messiah. And I was in the Spirit on Sunday. Well, that's what the Sunday keepers say. No, it was on the day of Jehovah's wrath. In other words, he had a vision during the days of Jehovah's wrath, foreseeing into the future. And heard behind me a great voice as a trumpet saying, I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, and what you see right in the book. Now, who just said they was Alpha and Omega and first and the last? It was Jehovah the Father himself. And what you see right in the book, and send it unto the 7 churches which are in Asia: Ephesus, Smyrna, and unto Pergamos, and unto Thyatira, Sardis, and unto Philadelphia and Laodicea. And I turned to see the voice that spoke unto me, and I being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. That's right. The Gentile church's habitation is not the crown of 12 stars. It is the 7 golden candlesticks. But unfortunately, as we have just read, these churches left their first estate just like the fallen angels did, and they tried to steal the crown of 12 stars from Israel, claiming that they, the church, is now Israel, and that the Jews are not. Verse 20, the mystery of the 7 stars, which you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks, the 7 stars, are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 candlesticks which you saw are the 7 churches. There are not 12 churches. The church is not 144,000, not figuratively and not literally. So now we go back to the 144,000 and address the Dan issue, as I have done before. Verse 4, I heard the number of men which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel except for Dan. Is that what it says? That's what everybody else says. Well, that's a lie. It does not say except for Dan, which means by default has to include Dan. So where did the numbering go wrong? Where was the mistake made by the translators? I'll read it to you until I find it, and then I will show it to you and expose it. Of the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Reuben were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Asher were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Naphtali were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Manasseh were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Simeon were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Levi were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Issachar were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Zebulun were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Joseph were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000. Did any of you Bible scholars see the mistake? Any at all? Joseph is the father of Manasseh and Ephraim. So Joseph is listed as one tribe when it's as 12, the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph is always one tribe. Therefore, this portion right here, the translators inserted Manasseh when it was supposed to be Dan. Manasseh is already representative of the tribe of Joseph, as is Ephraim. Remember, don't accuse me of saying that I cannot point out the mistake, because it very clearly says right here, all of the tribes of the children of Israel. It does not say except for Dan. So this verse trumps any mistake in 5, 6, 7, 8, verses 5, 6, 7, or 8. So the mistake was not made by Yohanan. The mistake was made by the translators. Because Yohanan himself said all of the tribes of Israel. He did not say all of the tribes of Israel except for Dan. Now, what they failed to mention, this is what I'm trying to tell you, the churches left their first estate like the fallen angels did and tried to seize this, the crown of 12 stars, as their own. And they failed to mention the great multitude. And as I have pointed out, the great multitude is of all the tribes of Israel that were mingled and scattered among the nations. You see, these 12, these 144,000, it says in a different scripture that they had not defiled themselves with women. What that would imply is neither did their forefathers. Think about that for a minute. In other words, apparently, they were not defiled with women literally, and neither were they defiled in their bloodlines with strange women. They weren't defiled, period. So who are these? Who are these? Well, the churches today, they don't want to be among these people. No. They think that they are this. They think that they are the 144,000, but they're not, and they'll never be. If they are unwilling to walk into the kingdom with this group of people, they will not walk into the kingdom at all. Period. So who is this group of people? In order to find out, you've got to look in the prophets. But we'll read this first. And after this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and peoples and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb. Where is it going to be? In Rome? Huh? No. In Jerusalem. Clothed with white robes and palms in their hands, and they cried with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our Elohim that sits upon the throne and unto the Lamb. And all the angels stood round about the throne, and about the elders and the four beasts fell before the throne with their faces and worshiped Jehovah, saying, Blessed and all glory and wisdom and thanksgiving, honor and power and might be to our Elohim forever and ever. One of the elders answered and sang unto me, What are these which are arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from? We're getting a little closer now, folks. Where did they come from? And I said unto him, Sir, you know. And he said unto me, These are those which came out of great tribulation. We'll stop right here for a minute. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this. Time of Jacob's trouble. Okay. Well, I guess I have to go to Google. Where in the world? Why don't they? It's Jeremiah 30, of course. And of course, now this is called the restoration of Israel and Judah. This is at the time of the end, at the restoration of Israel and Judah. There's going to become yet another time of Jacob's trouble. And the Gentile churches always like to stop right there. They won't read the rest of it. Why? Because they don't believe the rest of it. Verse 1, And the word that came to Jehovah, from Jehovah, saying, Thus speaks Jehovah, Elohim of Israel, saying, Write all these words that I have spoken to you in the book, for lo, the days come, says Jehovah, I will bring back again the captives of my people, Israel and Judah. Says Jehovah, I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they shall possess it. So you have to read Jeremiah 30 in that context. And these are the words that Jehovah spoke concerning Israel and concerning Judah. For thus saith Jehovah, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear, and not of peace. Why? Because they are saying peace and safety in Washington, D.C. Is that the reason and why? We shall soon find out. Verse 6, Ask you now, and see whether a man does travail with child. Why do I see every man with his hands on his loins, like a woman in travail, and all the faces are turned into paleness? Because, alas, for that day is great, so that there is nothing like it. That is the same as Daniel 12 and verse 1. No day like it ever recorded in history, nor shall it be after. Was this then right here the destruction of Jerusalem? The first one or the second one? No. It was the third attempt, which will fail. Alas, for that day is great, that there is none like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. Why do the Gentiles churches refuse to say the last part of that verse? Why? They speak like a dragon. That's why. How does a dragon speak? I'll give you an example of how the dragon speaks. I tell you what, knowledge of good and evil. We'll go to Genesis 2, verse 17. Let us learn how the dragon speaks. Genesis 3 and verse 1. Now the serpent was more subtle. Oh, with subtlety. Than any beast of the field which Jehovah Elohim has made. And he said unto the woman, yes, has Jehovah said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, Jehovah has said, you shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said unto the woman, you shall not surely die. Not really. That's just a figure of speech. That's just spiritually speaking. You shall not surely die, for Elohim knows that in the day that you eat thereof, then your eyes will be open, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman, that is speech of the serpent. That's how the woman, how the serpent speaks. Now, as you see here, verse 15, I will put enmity between you, the dragon, and the woman. What woman? That woman later becomes Israel, with the crown of 12 stars. Israel versus the dragon, which the dragon now has followed, or the churches have left their first habitation, left their first estate, and has joined the dragon. When I mean the church, I mean the Gentile church. And between your seed and her seed, and it shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So, to spiritualize the truth away, to say, well, it really doesn't mean that. That is speaking like a dragon. It really doesn't mean that. Now, so we go back to Revelation 7, and let's look at here. So who came out of great tribulation? Who was saved out of great tribulation? Huh? You want to try to spiritualize that away too? Huh? Well, we just read it in Isaiah, did we not? Or no, Jeremiah 30. Did we not? Jacob. Jacob is going to be saved out of the great tribulation. Jacob. The 12 tribes of Israel. Not only the 144,000, which would be a strong representative group of Israel, but also everything Israel, great and small, scattered throughout all the whole earth. Amos 8. I believe it's in Amos 8. It's not in Amos 8. Let's see. Shall be lost. Oh, is it Amos 3? Amos 4. I got it this. Gotta Google it again. Amos 9. Sorry about that. All right, the scattering of Israel. Verse 8. Behold, the eyes of Jehovah Elohim are upon the sinful kingdom, and I will destroy it from off the face of the earth. Just talking about anyway. Saving that I will not utterly destroy the house of Jacob. What does he mean? There are going to be a few left here and there, and from there they will mingle with the Gentiles, literally mix themselves with the Gentiles, and will grow in number. Be a mixed breed group of people. Yes, I said it. A mixed breed group of people. For lo, I will command, and I will sift the house of Israel. That's the lost 10 tribes. Among all the nations, like corn is sifted in a sieve, yet not the least grain shall fall upon the earth. So let's examine this for a minute. Let's go to Strong's Concordance and let's get a better understanding of what this is saying. Sift. To quiver, to wave, to tremble, to totter, like you do with a sieve. The house of Israel, among the Goy, to quiver, to wave, tremble, to totter, in a sieve. Okay, what do you wave, quiver, and totter in a sieve? Grain. Then it says, yet bag. The word thrower is bag. Then the next word is to fall. The fall in Hebrew, to fall or abandon. I don't know why it's not coming up. Abandon is what it means. Okay, so let's go back. We got the word abandon. So the word bag, what does that mean? Sewer, a bundle, parcel, bag. The second is a pebble. Oh, perhaps for a grain of wheat, in metaphor of winnowed Israel. Now we get to the truth. Okay, so small stone. A small stone. In other words, tiny, tiny, tiny. Okay. So what we do here is look at this real carefully. And what we see is, shall not the smallest stone or shall not the smallest kernel be abandoned in those lands? That's what it means. So he's going to scatter Israel throughout all the nations, yet not the tiniest stitch of them, though mingled with the other nations that they might be, will be left there abandoned in those lands. All the sinners of my people will die by the sword, and those who say evil will not overtake us nor prevent us. And they did. Now, Verse 14, I will bring again the captivity of who? My people Israel. And they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them, and shall plant vineyards and drink the wine thereof. And they shall also make gardens and eat the fruit thereof. And I will plant them upon their own land, and they shall be no more pulled up out of the land which I have given them, saith Jehovah. And this is in context with this, that he would be scattered them. So who was gathered out of all the nations, kindreds, and tongues? The ones who were scattered into all nations, kindreds, and tongues. And that is how you have to read Revelation 7, verses 9 through 17. They came out of great tribulation. Who was saved out of great tribulation? Israel. I've got another one for you. Let's go to Daniel 12. Verse 1, and at that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince which stands up for the people, children of your people. Who's that? Israel. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation to that same time. And at that time, your people, Daniel, shall be what? Saved. Is it 144,000? That's it? Wrong. It'll be an innumerable multitude that was scattered into every nation, kindred, and tongue. Now, so where does the church fit into all of this? If the church is not the woman with the crown of 12 stars, and the woman with the crown of 12 stars is going to be taken to her own place, as it is written in Revelation, right here, right? And when the dragon saw he was cast in there, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And boy, did he ever, for thousands of years. Then what happens? After the tribulation upon Israel is over, tribulation upon the Gentile begins, and the earth opened up the woman, to the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, which is the Holy Land. Her place, her place, her place, where she is nourished for a time, times half a time, away from the face of the serpent. She's going to be removed one by one by one. Not the least grain will be abandoned, left behind. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to, because he did not want her to receive the promise of the new covenant. No, the devil, which is Roman Christianity, wants exclusive rights to the new covenant, and they will try to make sure that Israel does not receive it, the new covenant, and in so doing, they have broken the new covenant, so that they have disqualified themselves from the new covenant by trying to steal it from Israel. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and then he went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of Jehovah and have the testimony of Yehoshua Messiah, namely the 2 witnesses. So, as I said earlier in this particular video, I pointed out that there were those like Herbert Armstrong. He and others tried to make the claim that the British royal family was of the house of David. That was a lie. And the reason why he perpetrated that lie was so that he somehow would have the right to collect money from the congregation. anyone who claims to anybody who claims a right to the royal line of David is a liar and a deceiver. I will go to the scripture that says this, and then I'm going to go back to this particular evil man. Wow. I don't want to actually go to him per se, but the edict of expulsion that he perpetrated. So, okay. A thief and a robber. Right. Oh, I misspelled it. Now, this is in context with the crown of 12 stars and with the 7 golden candlesticks. John 10, starting in verse 1, or Yohanan 10 and verse 1. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that enters not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbs up some other way, you know, like the Crusades tried to take Jerusalem by force. Remember those days? The same is a thief and a robber. For he that enters in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. So the man who closes and opens a door, he's the shepherd. To him the porter opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he puts forth his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice, and the stranger, the foreigner, they will not follow, but will flee from him. Weren't the Jews forced to flee from the Romans? Because they know not the voice of the strangers. This parable spoke Yehoshua unto them, but they understood not what the things which he spoke of. He said unto them again, verily I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep, and all that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, and the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. What is the door? What is the door to? The door is to the kingdom of Jerusalem. Not the kingdom of Rome. That is the dragon's door. And many are those who follow the dragon, who go through the dragon's door. But the Jews didn't, did they? They fled. And they will flee, all the tribes of Israel will flee the dragon's lair when Moshiach comes, and enter into the door of the shepherd. So anybody else is a fake and a fraud, including the crusading kings who tried to take Jerusalem by force. So, a classic example of one of these kings is King Edward I, Longshanks. A wicked and a foul man he was, and proof of his desperate wickedness. And one of the examples of him being a follower of the man at Rome. And here's another one. The Edict of Expulsion was a royal decree issued by King Edward I of England. On July 18th, 1290, he expelled all Jews from the Kingdom of England. And of course, this particular flag is the Kingdom of England. And that is also, by the way, the mark of the beast. Edward advised the sheriffs of all counties he wanted all Jews expelled by no later than All Saints' Day, November the 1st that year. The expulsion edict remained in force for the rest of the Middle Ages. The edict was not an isolated incident, but was a culmination of over 200 years of increased persecution. The edict was overturned during the protectorate of more than 350 years later when Oliver Cromwell, yes, he overthrew the king, which was a wonderful thing to do. And may Oliver Cromwell's name be blessed for what he did, who permitted the Jews to return to England in 1657. So where did the Jews of England come from? Well, the first Jewish communities of significant size came to England with William the Conqueror in 1066. After the conquest of England, William instituted a feudal system in the country whereby all estates formerly belonged to the crown. The king then appointed lords over these vast estates, but they were subject to duties and to obligations, financial and military, to the king. Under the lords, there were other subjects such as serfs, who were bound and obligated to their lords and to their lords' obligations as well. Merchants had a special status in the system, as did Jews. Jews were declared to be the direct subjects of the king, unlike the rest of the population. This was an ambivalent legal position for the Jewish population in that they were not tied to any particular lord, but were subject to the whims of the king. It could be either advantageous or disadvantageous. Every successive king formally reviewed a royal charter granting the Jews the right to remain in England. Jews did not enjoy any of the guarantees of the Magna Carta of 1215, thereby making them non-citizens. Economically, Jews played a key role in the country. The church then strictly forbade the lending of money for profit, creating a vacuum in the economy of Europe that the Jews filled because of extreme discrimination in every other economic area. In other words, the Jews were not even allowed to farm. They were not allowed to have any kind of occupation, and the only one that was left was money lending. Canon laws were not considered applicable to Jews, and Judaism does not forbid loans with interest between Jews and non-Jews. Taking advantage of their unique status in his direct subjects, the king could appropriate Jewish assets in the form of taxation. He levied heavy taxes on the Jews at will without having to summon parliament. The reputation of Jews as extortionate moneylenders arose, which made them extremely unpopular with both the church and the general public. While an anti-Jewish attitude was widespread in Europe, medieval England was particularly anti-Jewish. Anyone want to still hold on to this idea that the kings of England were somehow of the house of David? They were the worst. I'll say it again. The kings of England were the worst offenders of all of the kings of Europe in persecuting the Jews. An image of the Jew as a diabolical figure who hated Christ started to become widespread in myths such as the tale of the wandering Jew and the allegation of ritual murders originated and spread throughout England as well as Scotland and Wales. Yes, that's where it started, folks. In frequent cases of blood libel, Jews were said to have hunt children to murder before Passover so that they could use in their blood to make unleavened matzah. Yes, that lie began in jolly old England. Anti-Jewish attitudes sparked numerous riots in which many Jews were murdered. Notably in 1190, where over 100 Jews were massacred in York. The situation only got worse for Jews as the 13th century progressed. In 1218, Henry III of England proclaimed the Edict of the Badge, requiring Jews to wear a marking badge. Yes, like the one I am wearing today, or similar to the one that I'm wearing today. And for those of you who don't know why I wear it to honor the Jews of my ancestry who came before me, who were mocked, murdered, and pillaged by the Christians. Taxation grew increasingly intense between 1219 and 1272. 49 levies were imposed upon Jews for a total of 200,000 marks, a vast sum of money. Henry III imposed greater segregation and reinforced the wearing of badges in 1252 Statute of Jewry. He endorsed the myth of Jewish child murders. Yes, the King of England, who claims to be of the House of David. Meanwhile, his court and major barons bought Jewish debts with the intention of securing lands of lesser nobles through defaults. The Second Barons' War of 1260s brought a series of pogroms aimed at destroying the evidence of these debts, and Jewish communities in major towns, including London, where 500 Jews died. Worcester, Canterbury, and many other towns. The first major steps toward expulsion took place in 1275 with the Statute of the Jewry. The statute outlawed all lending at interest and gave Jews 15 years to readjust. The duchy in Gascony in 1287, King Edward ordered the local Jews expelled. All their property was seized by the crown, by Edward I, and all outstanding debts payable to Jews were transferred to the king's name. By the time he returned to England in 1289, King Edward was deeply in debt. The next summer, he summoned his knights to impose a steep tax. To make the tax more palatable, Edward, in exchange, essentially offered to expel all the Jews. The heavy tax was passed, and 3 days later, on July the 18th, the Edict of Expulsion was issued. One official reason for the expulsion was that Jews had declined to follow the Statute of Jewry and continued to practice usury. This is quite likely, as it would have been extremely hard for many Jews to take up the respectable occupation demanded by the statute. The Edict of the Expulsion was widely popular and met with little resistance, and the expulsion was quickly carried out. Jewish population in England at the time was relatively small, perhaps 2,000 people, although estimates vary. The expulsion process appears to have relative non-violent, although there were some accounts of the contrary. One perhaps apocryphal story told of a captain taking a ship full of Jews to the Thames en route to France while the tide was low and convincing them to go out for a walk with him. He then lost them and made it back to his ship quickly before the tide came back in, leaving them all to drown. And at that point, they were forced to emigrate to Scotland, France, the Netherlands, Poland, which at the time protected them. See the Statute of Aliz. Anyway, for those of you out there who are related to the kings of England and think that's a wonderful thing, you should reconsider that. And you should consider it instead a curse. Because the kings of England were the most foul, were the most murderous, and the most slanderous against the Jews of all the kings of Europe, with the exception of one. And that is the beast himself at the throne in the Vatican.